You muted yourself, Vivian.
I'm
You'll
not
have to
there.
unmute.
Okay, I have to there.
Okay, you
All
better
right.
start again.
I better start again.
Introduce
It's
Introduce
Van
us.
and Vivian. Vivian reminded me that we should introduce ourselves. Van and Vivian, and we run this study of the Vancouver Bereans, which is a more detailed study than I have usually done in the past. All these studies are a very close examination of the words in the King James Bible, which is from the Textus Receptus. So it is, we're now into winter, a few days before Christmas, shortest day of the year. Sun rises in Vancouver at 8:07, sets at 4:14. Boy, that's a pretty short day. Okay, so we're moving along. We're in another passage of First Corinthians that we've selected that we're going to take a little closer look. Doctrinal matters that are resolved by the authority of the King James Bible. And Paul encourages critical thinking. He says, I speak to wise men, judge ye what I say. So this is the apostle speaking to those who were called, and he gives them instruction that they should judge what they hear. And this is what we should all do. We don't come to this study thinking that we're some sort of an authority or that we have a perfect understanding. We do want everyone, to think for themselves what's being said. And if you see differently or understand differently, that's to be encouraged. Now, we have a social media presence. We'll just put this up for a moment and say that we heard from some of our listeners, some of our faraway listeners especially. We heard from Solvi and Oddman, who live in Norway. And if I'm going to say this right, Djursvika, Norway. That's where Solvi and we hear from them from time to time. It's really nice to hear from them. We also heard from a listener in the UK who goes by the handle of Jaded. Greetings, Jaded. Nice to get your greetings. So if you go to our website, you can reach us with, there is a contact page. Also, if you go to YouTube, you can leave a comment. And if you let us know the location from where you're listening, we don't have to have your name or anything, any detailed information, but it would be nice to know your area, so like the country, maybe the county or the city. And what we'll do, like Michelle, who works with us, will stick a flag in our map, which is on our website, midaxvancouver.ca, and we'll put a flag in, a listener flag in. Okay, so we're going to move ahead to this next passage. This is our 10th passage that we're looking at, selected from 1 Corinthians 10, verses 1 to 7, the rock that followed them. Now, that is the matter that is covered in these few verses, but what we're going to drill down on, Paul is speaking to ignorant brethren. And so we ask the question, who were the ignorant brethren? I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren. Now, Acts 8:30, and this is interesting. Philip ran thither to him. That would be
Ethiopian
the
eunuch.
Ethiopian, thank you, the Ethiopian eunuch, and asked him, who was sitting in his chariot and reading scripture. He said, Philip asked him, understandest thou what thou readest? Now, interesting, Philip asked the word, now, can you interpret, not can you interpret what you're reading? It's, do you understand what you're reading? And that's the challenge for all of us. Vivian and I included, we are all challenged in understanding the scriptures. The language is, uh, it's sophisticated and not representative of the way we speak today. So it does take extra work to understand. And what we're endeavoring to do with these studies is to do that some of the work to understand better what we're reading. So we'll move ahead into the study now. Vivian will read.
1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 1 through 6. Moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant, how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And all did eat the same spiritual meat. And all did drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. But with many of them God was not well pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things were our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things, as they also lusted.
Okay, so from this we see that Paul is asking a question about the brethren, or rather that he doesn't want them to be ignorant. Now, that's what Philip asked the Ethiopian eunuch. He says, "Do you understand?" And we're going to refer again to Brother Miles Coverdale, who translated the first fully English Genesis to Revelation uh, uh, version of or edition of the Textus Receptus. And Miles had these words: "It shall greatly help you to understand the scriptures." That was Philip's question. "If thou mark not only what is spoken or written, but of whom and to whom, with what words." So we're focusing, especially right now in these particular studies, we focused on other matters in terms of time and intent and circumstances. But right now we're focusing on what words. So Paul writes, verse 1, 1 Corinthians 10, "Moreover, brethren." Now that word moreover is Paul saying that I have more to say to you. He said something to them already, but now he has more to say to them, brethren. And he goes, "I would not that ye should be ignorant." So there were things they didn't know, even though Paul had told them some things. There were things that they should, how that all our fathers were under the cloud and passed through the sea. So Paul addresses his brethren, and he calls them brethren, that they should not be ignorant. Now, the question is, who were those that were ignorant? Well, we say, well, I guess it was us. We were the ones that were ignorant. Well, there was actually another group that were ignorant, and we're gonna do some investigation of some verses in Scripture to credentialize that yes, we are ignorant, but there were those that were before us who were ignorant. And those that were before us who were ignorant were Hebrews. They were Hebrews that were cut off from the people. Now, how did they end up being cut off from the people? Genesis 17:14.
Genesis 17:14. And the uncircumcised man-child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant.
Okay, so that is an instruction that God gave to Abraham, and it was followed. They were obedient to this instruction, but it had interesting consequences. Now, there were those that were ignorant then, and we're going to find out why they were ignorant, but they were ignorant being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel. Now, we take that from Ephesians 2:12. Now, what is an alien? That today we hear a lot of talk about illegal aliens. Well, an alien is an individual that belongs to another place. So where they are is not where they actually belong. So they're referred to as an alien. So there were those that were aliens, and then notice there's the preposition of the word from. So they were aliens, they were from another place. Now, where was that other place that they were from? They were from the Commonwealth of Israel. Now, this is very easy to just slop over and not understand properly. The English is very clear that these aliens were from the Commonwealth of Israel. Now, if you say, well, Van, aren't you a Gentile? Are you know? But I'm not from the Commonwealth of Israel. I am an alien as far as Israel is concerned, but I'm not from the Commonwealth of Israel. They were those that were aliens, and they were from the Commonwealth of Israel. They were also, wherever they went, as being from the Commonwealth of Israel, they arrived as strangers. Now, a stranger is a foreigner. So if somebody is from the Commonwealth of Israel, when they go someplace else, like another country, another area, they end up there being a foreigner. So aliens and foreigners. These were the ones that were ignorant. Why were they ignorant? Because they were no longer within the Commonwealth of Israel, benefiting from all that Israel held in common: language, uh, customs, traditions, education, storytelling, you name it. Not being part of the Commonwealth of Israel made these individuals who were aliens and strangers, they were now deprived of the background. So Paul, in addressing these brethren, says, I would not that ye should be ignorant. So they need some background, some history lessons, and Paul is going to provide it. Now, who are those that were cut off? Referred to? How are they referred to in the Bible? They were called. Now, they shall call thee an outcast. Now, this is interesting in that the word outcast in the King James Bible is that when it occurs, in this particular reference is capitalized, capital O UTCAST. So these were the outcasts and the dispersed. Where do we see that? We see it in Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 17.
Jeremiah 30, verse 17. For I will restore health unto thee, and I will heal thee of thy wounds, saith the Lord, because they called thee an outcast, saying, This is Zion, whom no man seeketh after.
Okay, so this is interesting. Now, Jeremiah 30:17 has this word outcast. And that word outcast, it points to somebody that has been rejected, a rejected person. So that means whatever people whomever they were with, they were rejected. Who was rejected? The uncircumcised. The uncircumcised then end up being outcast. Now, the King James Bible is pretty well the only Bible, except for also the Webster's translation, which unfortunately is not based on the Textus Receptus, but the Webster translation also capitalizes the O in outcast, because the words are, they called thee an outcast. So this is a title for those, and the King James Bible translators knew it should be capitalized.
It's a proper noun.
It's a proper noun. It's a name.
Just like in Ephesians 2:12.
Exactly. So where we have the Gentiles, we have the uncircumcised, capital U, uncircumcised. So these are the rejected persons of Israel because they were not circumcised, saying, This is Zion, whom no man seeketh after. So there was like they didn't care about them. And then Isaiah 11:12.
Isaiah chapter 11, verse 12. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth.
Now, this is interesting. Isaiah 11:12. This is another reference to those rejected persons. He shall set up an ensign. Now, an ensign is a body of men serving under a banner, one banner. So it's interesting that the outcasts are one day going to be set up as a troop of men for the nations. They'll be and they shall assemble the outcasts, those that are rejected of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah. Notice, where are they dispersed from? From Judah. Both the outcasts of Israel and the dispersed of Judah. So both the northern and the southern kingdoms are going to be gathered together. And then these outcasts and the dispersed are from the four corners of the earth. So that word dispersed, that is, they were separate in different directions. They have ended up all over the earth, the four corners of the earth. No, scripture doesn't say around the earth. It went to the four corners of the earth. Take from that what you will. Okay. Now, how were those of Israel cut off referred to in the Bible? They were referred to as the outcast of Israel and the dispersed of Judah. So the cut off, and we remember we're taking this from Genesis 17:14, speaking of the man-child that is not circumcised. They are those that are rejected.
Cut off from the people.
Cut off from the people. Psalm 147, verse 2.
Psalm 147, verse 2. The Lord doth build up Jerusalem. He gathereth together the outcasts of Israel.
Okay, so there again, the occasion of the word outcast, the outcast of Israel.
Isaiah 56, verse 8. The Lord God, which gathereth the outcasts of Israel, saith, Yet will I gather others to him, besides those that are gathered unto him.
Okay, again, the word outcast. Outcast, not just any outcast, it's the outcast of Israel because they weren't circumcised. They were cut off from the people. So there are indeed Hebrews who are uncircumcised. They are Hebrew Gentiles. And then again,
Ezekiel 36, verse 19. And I scattered them among the heathen, and they were dispersed through the countries. According to their way and according to their doings, I judged them.
okay, so notice this now, where the dispersed are scattered among the heathen. And they're all over now the earth, and they're living with the heathen, and they are becoming part of heathen society. They know nothing now, or have lost a lot of their understanding of what was commonly understood in Israel. So when Paul says, I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, here we have a collection of people, a very large collection of people who are ignorant. Why are they ignorant? Because they're not part of their own people, the Hebrews in Israel. They've been moved out.
Strangers from the Commonwealth.
Yes.
Ben?
So, yes, Neil.
Yeah, just to add to it, I noticed, was reading Galatians, and they are also referred to as the heathen themselves.
Yes. Yeah. So, in fact, there were many things that were said to these Hebrews who were uncircumcised. They're Hebrew Gentiles, because that's what an uncircumcised person is a Gentile. That there was many very harsh and critical and depreciative comments that were made of these Hebrews that were not circumcised.
And that verse that he's referring to, that Neil was referring to, Galatians 2, verse 8.
Okay.
Sorry, 9.
Okay, and how does it read?
And that when James, Cephas, and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given unto me, they gave to me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, that we should go unto the heathen, and they unto the circumcision.
Yes, okay. So the heathen there points to the uncircumcised of Israel. Now, I know for a lot of folks, this is difficult to accept because it's not taught in mainline Christianity. So this comes across as very odd information. Well, you're not following me and Vivian. We're following the text, and that is my authority. So if I want to find out what God is doing, I need to submit to the authority of the text of the Bible, and I might actually learn something. Okay, now What were those who were cut off called in the Bible? So they were called. Now notice this, it's capital U, uncircumcision. And we take this from Ephesians 2:11.
Ephesians 2:11. Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands.
Okay, so they were called uncircumcision. Now, we say, well, yes, I'm a Gentile, but there are none that go around calling me the uncircumcision. So this is actually a depreciative comment that's being made to a particular group of Gentiles, and specifically Hebrew Gentiles. And so they're being downcast with this reference, and they're called the uncircumcision. And that is being done by those that are circumcised. And then Paul adds in here, the circumcision in the flesh made by hands, which is really Paul's pointing to their spiritual state. Their circumcision didn't make them spiritually special because it was only a circumcision that was made by hands.
In the flesh.
In the flesh. It was just, so there was not a circumcision of the heart. Now, the uncircumcised were raised outside of the nation of Israel. And this is important for me to pay attention to. And so since they were raised outside the nation of Israel, there would have been some differences for these individuals. They're Hebrews, but they're being raised elsewhere. There would be differences in terms of their understanding of history and culture, traditions, their education, the way they're governed, and their religious knowledge of God, of the God of Israel. So they would have their knowledge of the God of Israel would have been disadvantaged, because as time would go on, the knowledge would actually, it would soften. There would be less knowledge of the God of Israel. Now, what happened to the uncircumcised and how did they survive? Now, remember that Paul speaks of the commonwealth of Israel. So being within their nation, there are employment and business opportunities, abilities that are not afforded once you leave. So how did they survive? Well, the dispersed, were actually poor. When you get pushed out of the country and you got to go find your way someplace else, but God paid attention to them and gave them some abilities so that they could support themselves.
Psalm 112, verse 9. He hath dispersed, he hath given to the poor, his righteousness endureth forever. His horn shall be exalted with honor.
Okay, so again, we're talking about the dispersed, and they're poor. So the dispersed, they're in separate directions. They're all over the earth. And so it says here now that God has given to the poor. And he speaks of his horn shall be exalted with honor. Now, a horn is an emblem of power and might, like the horn of salvation. But then we also speak of the horn, and this is sense number 12 in the Oxford English Dictionary, is a vessel. We hold it, reference it as the horn of plenty. So there is a horn, his horn of plenty shall be exalted with honor. So what God did was he enabled these dispersed to find ways to support themselves. So it wasn't as if he just sent them a food basket. He actually enabled them to be able to do things so that they could find work and support themselves. Now, outside the Commonwealth of Israel, the dispersed were poor, but God enabled them.
Yeah, it's interesting. They were cut off by the people, from the people.
Yeah.
And yet they weren't cut off from God.
Yeah, no, exactly. They weren't cut off from God. God still has, in fact, this was a mystery. This was the mystery that God had a plan for these dispersed, the outcast. How would those Hebrews cut off survive economically? They may have had some work employment, and we have evidence of that in Scripture. To non-Hebrew Gentiles, they were they had employment, I should say, by non-Hebrew Gentile masters, and they were employed by these non-Hebrew Gentile masters as servants. And we see that clearly in a verse. We're going to go to it in just a moment. The other place of employment was to Jews as servants. So two places that the outcast would find employment. So first of all, to non-Hebrew Gentile masters as servants, we have 1 Timothy 6:1.
1 Timothy 6:1. Let as many servants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of all honor, that the name of God and his doctrine be not blasphemed.
Okay, so now this is Paul's instruction to Timothy, who then instructed the called to be saints. And Paul is telling Timothy that the called to be saints who are servants, and they have a master. And this master is a non-Hebrew Gentile. They're not to despise these men who employ them. They are to count them worthy of all honor, so that the name of God and his doctrine be not blasphemed. And so this is common amongst in the world today, that if there's a vile thing that's going to be said about God, it's going to be said about those that think poorly of the Christian faith. And so Paul wants the servants to behave properly so that others don't find a reason to that is, to be irreverent towards God. Now, those that were cut off also served Jews as servants.
Jeremiah 34, verse 9, looking back in history. That every man should let his manservant, and every man his maidservant, being an Hebrew or an Hebrewess, go free, that none should serve himself of them, to wit, of a Jew his brother.
Okay, so Jeremiah 34:9, we have both the word Hebrew, Hebrewess, which is the female, and the word Jew in this one verse. So from that, I take this is clear instruction that a Hebrew is not necessarily a Jew, and a Jew is not necessarily a Hebrew. What's the difference? Circumcision. All Jews were circumcised, but not all Hebrews were circumcised.
And another thing, the Jew knew the law.
Yes.
The Jew knew there was a law of liberty.
Yeah.
But the Hebrew probably didn't know that they were supposed to be set
Right.
free after 7 years.
Yeah.
And so that account in Jeremiah talks about
Yeah.
how they abused their brethren.
Yeah. Now, what we see here in this verse, Jeremiah 34:9, is the Hebrew and the Hebrewess needed employment. So they're cut off from the Commonwealth of Israel. They find a Jew and they put themselves under servitude of that Jew so they can serve him and then earn some income. So the Jew, that's a circumcised Hebrew, was his brother, but he was the one that was part of the Commonwealth of Israel. And because the Jews were part of the Commonwealth of Israel, they had a better financial standing because they were plugged into the economy, the Jewish economy. But the Hebrew and the Hebrewess, the uncertain, well, they weren't plugged in anymore. So now they needed to find a way to connect and support themselves. So here we have in these two verses 1 Timothy 6:1 and Jeremiah 34:9, we have evidence as to how the uncircumcised of the Hebrews were able to support themselves outside of the Commonwealth of Israel.
Mm.
Now, where did the dispersed live? Well, they lived among the Gentiles of the nations. And we see that here in some select verses.
Ezekiel chapter 12, verse 15. And they shall know that I am the Lord when I shall scatter them among the nations and disperse them in the countries.
Okay, so we're talking about the dispersed, and they are scattered among the nations. And then
Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 23. I lifted up mine hand unto them also in the wilderness, and I would scatter them among the heathen and disperse them throughout the countries.
Okay, so we're talking about the dispersed. That's the dispersed, and that they are living among the heathen, and they're scattered among the heathen. So this is informing me that these uncircumcised are quite literally scattered all over the earth. And because they're uncircumcised, well, they're no longer identifiable as it's not obvious that they're a Hebrew anymore. They've just melded right into the Gentile of the nation society. So, in fact, many of them may not even know themselves that they have lineage that goes back to Hebrewism. But I suspect most of them do know.
Van,
Yes, Neil.
this last verse there from Ezekiel, it never crossed my mind before, but I almost read that as something I never, like I say, never thought, is that some of the Hebrews that were with Moses in the wilderness, those 40 years,
Yeah.
it almost sounds like some of them were scattered among the heathen and dispersed through the countries, even going back that far. Is that possible?
It is possible. Now, we know from Scripture that Joshua needed to circumcise, and we covered this last Sunday, a couple Sundays ago, needed to circumcise Israel because while they were on their wilderness journey, they stopped circumcising. And so God wouldn't let them into the promised land unless they accepted circumcision. Now, Neil, to your point, I mean, we can suspect there may have been some men who have said,
No way.
no way. You take that knife away from me, and I'll just go someplace else. So yes, they could have gone, even back then, they could have gone to just someplace else, a Hebrew, uncircumcised, and just made a living, made their way someplace else.
Yeah, but it was happening from that time forward.
Yeah.
All the way through to the time of Paul.
Yeah. So the Hebrew is really, they're in the world, and many of them are just hid by the fact that they're not circumcised. Ezekiel 36.
Ezekiel 36, verse 19. And I scattered them among the heathen, and they were dispersed through the countries. According to their way and according to their doings, I judged them.
Okay, so they belong to God. These Hebrews belong to God because he said that they are his elect. And it says they were dispersed through the countries, but God still is dealing with them according to their way and according to their doings. So the fact that they're not circumcised doesn't mean that they're going to be able to hide from God. No, they're still God's elect.
Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 10. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughters of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering.
Okay, so again, we're dealing with the daughter of my dispersed. So I mean, this is pointing to how pervasive this population is.
And John chapter 7, verse 35. Then said the Jews among themselves, Whither will he go that we shall not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles?
Okay, so then again, understanding John 7:35. Now we have a basis to understand that the dispersed actually refers to the Hebrews that were referred to as Gentiles because they were uncircumcised. So the dispersed Hebrews
Yeah.
are
And they're
Gentiles.
dwelling among Gentiles of the nations.
Yeah, so
They're
that
among the Gentiles of the nations.
exactly. So this is better understood by Hebrews and Jews than it's understood by those of us who are Gentiles of the nations. Because replacement theology has wanted to make the Bible all about us when Israel rejected their Messiah. And so by doing that, by making the Bible all about us, we deprive ourselves of being able to see exactly what the text says and to whom it is referring.
Brother Van, if I can make a comment here too, it's all about the land. And
Yeah.
when the people are disobedient and don't listen to the word and obey, one of the curses is that the land will spew them out. And
Well,
so,
yes, you're
and so
absolutely right.
part of their judgment, these dispersed ones, is not being in the land. It's considered a judgment because they should be in the land at the
Yeah.
end of the day.
Exactly.
They're being judged by God.
Yeah,
They were dispersed by
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, you raise a very good point. I'm going to take occasion, Phil, to say that present day Israel, there are Jews, rabbis in Israel who know that there is a condition for them to be in the land. And that condition is to be obedient to the law. And we have seen messages from Orthodox Jewish rabbis who are wringing their hands in despair the way Israel is living. They're afraid because they know they are not keeping the condition to be able to stay in the land, that the land will at some point spew them out, and they're afraid of this, and fear is going to be coming because they are not keeping the law. It may not be obvious right now, but there are those that know they believe in Jehovah God.
They want their temple built so they can think they can
Yeah.
keep the law and please God by
Yeah,
it.
they want to start making
Yeah.
sacrifices again and ask for forgiveness via the sacrifices because they know they are not doing what
Yeah.
God expects of them.
Yeah.
Now, Paul addresses his Hebrew brethren, they should not be ignorant. So we've looked now at this matter of who were the ignorant brethren. Well, they were those that were deprived of the commonwealth of Israel because they were not circumcised. So Paul says, moreover, he says, I have more to tell you, brethren. I would not that you should be ignorant, how that all our fathers, now this is interesting, he's speaking about our fathers. Now, they're not my fathers because I descend from a tribe of Armenians, and the Armenians were pagans, and they knew nothing of the one true God until they were told. So brethren here are the called to be saints. So Paul is speaking to the called to be saints, that you called to be saints, should be ignorant. He says, you shouldn't be ignorant. And then he gives them the history. So this is the matter that they were ignorant of, how all our fathers were under the cloud and passed through the sea. I mean, we think, well, we learned all this in Sunday school. Why were they ignorant of it? Well, they didn't have Sunday school to go to. Gentiles today have actually a better education of some of Israel's history than they had at that time. So he speaks about our fathers, not my father, but their fathers.
Of the lineage.
Yeah, of the lineage of the
bloodline.
children of Israel, the fathers of the children of Israel. He's Exodus 13.
Exodus 13, I will read verse 18 and verses 21 and 22. Verse 18, but God led the people about through the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt.
So now they were harnessed. Now that word harnessed is like we would understand to yoke in a harness, to put in harness, to say mount. When we talk about harnessing horses, well, I remember that Israel was brought out on eagle's wings. So here we have the children of Israel. They went up harnessed. How were they harnessed? They were harnessed on eagle's wings. It was eagle's wings. And this is Exodus 13. This is before we get to the time where they said, we will do.
The Lord has said we will do.
Before they make that
Yeah.
terrible blunder in addressing God, they spoke of we will do. But up until this point here at Exodus 13, they were still on eagle's wings.
I think of a hot air balloon. It's harnessed. That
Yeah.
undercarriage is harnessed to the hot air balloon.
That's a very good
Yeah.
example. So yeah, they were being floated out of Egypt.
By God's grace.
Yeah, indeed. So they were under the cloud, so the cloud provided them shade during the day, and the Lord went before them.
Oh, shall I read that?
Yeah, go ahead and read
So
this.
Exodus 13, verses 21 and 22. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. He took not away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people.
Okay, so we have here a pillar of cloud, and the benefit of a pillar of cloud was to provide them shade. Isn't this nice? God is looking after the people. They're coming out on eagle's wings. He's got cloud over them so that they don't get burnt to pieces under the desert sun. And at night, when they're still marching, they have a pillar of fire to give them light. So they could move by both day and night would have been perhaps a better time to move because it was cooler.
Mm.
Okay, and then we come to, so he's put them in Sunday school. They were under the cloud. They passed through the sea.
Verse 2.
And now verse 2, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. So here we have this word baptized. And for us here in North America, in the West, we see the word, well, even in Europe, we see the word baptized, and the first thing that we think of is were they sprinkled or dunked? Well, this word baptized in the Oxford English Dictionary has the sense of definition of denominated. So what we're reading here is all were denominated unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. Where you say, well, that's no help. What good is this word denominated to understand the word baptized? Well, let me change the context. I can say, what Christian denomination do you belong to? Now, the word denominated starts to come into view. This is a denomination. So we talk about the Baptist denomination, Presbyterian denomination, whatever denominations. Now, these that are marching in the wilderness are all denominated unto Moses. So that what that tells me is they belong to the denomination of Moses. They don't belong to the Baptists or to the Presbyterians or to any other denomination. They all were a part of the Moses denomination. They were one people unto Moses, and that's how they were moving in the cloud and in the sea. So my comment here is all that came out of Egypt were called with Moses under the cloud and passed through the sea, and all of Israel was of Moses' denomination. So we don't need to be puzzled by this word baptized anymore. It doesn't have to mean water. It's better to understand the context. here, and this is the association. They were denominated unto Moses. And then
By God,
by God, yes, this is God's work.
the cloud and through the sea. And
Yeah, they were
under
one
the cloud.
people. Yeah. And all did eat the same spiritual meat. And we have here.
Exodus chapter 16, verses 14 and 15. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as the hoar frost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, It is manna, for they wist not what it was. And Moses said unto them, This is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat.
Okay, so I'm recalling that they're being carried on eagle's wings. This is Exodus 16. This is before the collapse in Exodus 19. They are still being carried on eagle's wings. God is taking care of everything for them. Even when they complain, even when they murmur, they're not being disciplined. They're still being looked after generously. They're in a dispensation. They're in an arrangement of grace. God is carrying them through. They have done nothing to deserve it. God says, you're my elect. You're going to serve me, and I'm going to take you there.
And it's the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat.
Yes, the Lord
Hath
hath given you to eat. It's just they didn't have to do what even Adam had to do, where he had to, by the sweat of his brow, he had to raise food for himself. No, God is just giving them to eat. And I rather think that when we get to the heavenly places where our citizenship, our forever home is, God is going to give us to eat, and we won't have to do any work. The table will be set for us, and we'll just be able to enjoy. 1 Corinthians 10:4, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock and that followed them, and that rock was Christ. Now, this is Paul speaking to the brethren that he did not want to be ignorant. And he's explaining to them all these details, and he's connecting it to what they know as well. So they needed water, and so there was a rock that Moses was instructed to strike the rock once, and that rock then flowed with water, and that water satiated the thirst of the Hebrews. Now, Paul tells them that the rock was Christ, and that rock actually followed them. So they didn't have to go to the rock to get their water. The water was with them. Amazing.
Exodus 17, verses 3 and 4. And the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses and said, Wherefore is this that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, What shall I do unto this people? They be almost ready to stone me.
I had to share with Vivian. I said, when I read this, I find humor in this. It's almost like Moses at his wit's end with these people of his, saying, What shall I do unto this people? They're almost ready to stone me. Like, you could just see the picture in my mind's eye of Moses being at the end of his rope with this people that he does not want to lead. He just doesn't want the job, but he's doing it anyhow. And they're murmuring, they're complaining. So this is a murmur, and actually murmur's a sin, but not yet, because they're being carried by eagles on eagle's wings.
There's no law.
There's no law, and they're not being disciplined. At this point, they're not being disciplined for later. They will be disciplined for murmuring, because they told God that we're going to do whatever you tell us to do, we'll do it. And so God didn't want them to murmur. So then when they murmured later, after Exodus 19, yes, then they were disciplined. What shall I do? So God gave Moses instructions so that they could have water. Okay, and the Lord said unto Moses, Go on before the people, and take with thee of the elders of Israel, and thy rod, wherewith thou smotest the river. So the river, the sea where you cross, the river, says, Take it in your hand and go. Behold, I will stand before thee upon the rock of Horeb, the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink.
Exodus 17, verses 5 and 6a.
Yeah, so there's the rock, the rock that was smitten, and water came out of it. And the rock that was smitten, that rock that was smitten is already now, and Paul is drawing this out to the call to be saints because they don't know this. Paul is telling them that rock that was smitten, well, that is actually, that's Christ, that's the Savior.
Van,
First Cor-
Brent, that is new information. That's the moreover because nobody knew this. This is
Yes.
new information.
Well, the Jews would have known this,
Yeah, the
but
Jews-
No, they wouldn't have
the-
known that the rock was Christ.
No.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Yes,
that
I see
was-
what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yes.
it,
Mhm.
it came from Paul.
1 Corinthians 10:4 up on your screen now. Yeah, that was the new information. That rock was Christ.
So, and so Paul is now telling these cut off Hebrews, uncircumcised, who have been called to be saints. This is amazing information that they're getting. If we put ourselves, try to relate to them hearing these things from their apostle, where Paul says to them in verse 4, and did all drink that same spiritual drink, for they drank of the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. And then we have now, this gives us a better understanding now of this next verse.
Exodus 17.
No,
John chapter 7, verse 37. In the last day, that great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried, saying, If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink.
Amazing cohesion in the scriptures, where the picture, the work, the things that are being said are, there's just enormous cohesion, no lapse of connection. And Jesus said, let him come unto me and drink. And that rock in the desert was Christ. And then continuing on with Exodus 17, verse 7. Now, this is instruction that is going to the children of Israel.
And he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the chiding of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, Is the Lord among us or not?
Okay, so they're chiding the children of Israel are chiding, and that chiding is to an expression of displeasure, a vehement expression of displeasure, and that's what the children of Israel were doing. They were very very unhappy because they were thirsty, and they tempted. That is, and that word tempted is to test. So that's the first sense definition in the Oxford English Dictionary. So when I read the word tempted, what they're doing is they're testing Jehovah God. And the test was, is the Lord among us or not? So amazing. They've got the cloud by day, the fire by night. They've got the manna, and now their test is the Lord among us or not. Amazing. The children of Israel tempted the Lord. That is, they were testing the Lord Jehovah God, who by eagle's wings was now transporting them out of Egypt and would carry them all the way to the land that had been promised to them, and they are just being a headache every step of the way. So tempting the Lord or testing the Lord is just not a good idea. But fortunately, this is before what they had to say in Exodus 17, so they're not going to be punished. They're not going to be disciplined for testing their God, Jehovah God.
Because they're not yet under the law.
Yeah. Now,
Verse 5, 1 Corinthians 10, verse 5. Oh, sorry.
okay,
It's
so,
your-
but with many of them, God was not well pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now, this is, Paul is looking forward now to when they were under the law, where they said, whatever God says, we will do. Now they're exhibiting behavior that is not pleasing to God, and consequently they were overthrown in the wilderness. That is, they died in the wilderness.
Numbers chapter 14, verses 32 and 33. But as for you, your carcasses, they shall fall in this wilderness, and your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years, and bear your whoredoms, until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness.
Okay, so this is from Numbers 14. So we're now well into the arrangement where now they had said to God, we'll do whatever you say. So God is giving them instructions, and God is not pleased with their response. In fact, notice this, that there's whoredoms that are going on. I forgot to plug this in. There, plugged in there.
Whew. Oh,
No, it's still there. I just, sorry, folks. I neglected to plug in before I started, but now we're plugged in. So there were whoredoms. So the children of Israel in their wilderness march, their behavior was abysmal.
mm.
And God said he says, your carcasses, you're going to die in the wilderness. Your behavior is so bad. Okay, now this is Paul's summary conclusion, which we take from 1 Corinthians 10:6, where Paul says, now these things are examples to the intent we, that is the called to be saints, should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. So this is a command to the uncircumcised of the Hebrews, those that were called to be saints, Hebrew Gentiles. They were to see these things. Paul said, these are now what I've shared with you are examples that we, called to be saints, should not lust after evil things as they, so let's not do what they did. We need to be different. We need to follow what God is instructing us to do. Now, for us, we who are partakers of the benefit, this is the wisdom of God, because we do not have the abilities, the knowledge, the understanding, the capabilities to perform these things that the Hebrews said that they would do, but then didn't do. We haven't made that commitment to God, nor is God seeking that commitment from us. So for us, this is very excellent wisdom, that we should not do the things that happened in the wilderness or other bad things that were done by the Hebrews. They're an example for us as well. Okay, now this has taken more time than I thought. So I think this next section 11, we won't be able to complete it. And I hesitate to start it and not get through it. Our lead verse in 1 Corinthians 11:1 is, be ye followers of me. This is Paul speaking to the called to be saints. He says, be ye followers of me. And then we compare this with John 8, Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 12. Then Jesus spake unto them and saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. So we have Jesus saying that he's the one that should be followed. And then we have Paul saying that they should be followers of him. This is a bit of a nightmare for certain denominations because this is not what they want to read, but it's in Scripture. We're going to deal with it, and we'll deal with it next Sunday, not this Sunday, because this is not a section to be rushed through. We're going to be referring to things that were said by the reformers, 16th and 17th century reformers, who were trying to deal with these things when they thought that Israel now is nothing and it's all about them, the reformers. So we'll end the study there, and we'll pick up next time on this particular study.